That Vladimir Putin is essentially a showman, because what he does is he tries to put on the appearance of being strong. He tries to put on the appearance that Russia is a strong state, but that's simply not the case. As you know, just this morning I returned from Slavyansk in Donbass, as in Kyiv the day before. Russia has not taken Pokrovsk, it has not taken Vovchansk, and the fact is the Russian press says they have, Vladimir Putin says they have, but they haven't. They have failed.
Special Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, is in Moscow right now. What should we wait in terms of this visit?
We shouldn't expect very much to come of this visit by Witkoff. The reality is that the Kremlin is trying to waste time of the Americans. They're trying to give this illusion that they're very interested in peace, but the fact of the matter is there is no interest in ending the war right now. It's too economically beneficial to many people in senior positions in the Kremlin. Now, considering that today, Witkoff is also not a great negotiator. He has no background in this, he doesn't have experience in this, and he doesn't really seem to understand fundamentally what is occurring. And that's why the Russians have been leaking tapes with him. The Russians are making a mockery of him time and again. So even though he's gone out of his way to essentially help Russia, to say, here's how you appeal to the US president, the Russians have said thank you by leaking the tapes. That shows you how little they really respect him. So I think that when we look at all these different factors, there's almost nothing that will come of this. Russia, of course, will give the impression they're very interested in peace and they support Donald Trump winning a Nobel Peace Prize. But the fact of the matter is that there is no way this war is going to end thanks to Witkoff visiting Moscow, but the 6th meeting now that he's had. It's just a waste of time. The reality is that Vladimir Putin's objectives have not changed since the beginning of this war. That's according to U.S. intelligence reports. But more than that, the fact is that Witkoff doesn't have really the ability to offer much. The Ukrainians have agreed to a lot that Russia had demanded, but at the same time, a huge amount of what Russia is demanding has not been agreed to, and it's unlikely to be agreed to in the near term. But today we have to also understand that Russia is not negotiating for a position of strength, but rather a position of weakness. And increasingly, I think that Witkoff will be exposed in the press when more calls come out and there's more leaks showing that he is trying his best to get Russia to go along with this, and he's failing at it. The fact is that Russia doesn't want peace right now.
A day before the meeting with Witkoff, Putin put on military uniform again. What's the reason? And can exaggerated successes of Russia on the front line influence on Trump's decision, for instance, to make profitable solutions for Moscow?
I think we have to understand that Vladimir Putin is essentially a showman, because what he does is he tries to put on the appearance of being strong. He tries to put on the appearance that Russia is a strong state, but that's simply not the case. As you know, just this morning I returned from Slavyansk in Donbass, as in Kyiv the day before. Russia has not taken Pokrovsk, it has not taken Vovchansk, and the fact is the Russian press says they have, Vladimir Putin says they have, but they haven't. They have failed. Russia now is more than 1,300 days into this 3-day special military operation, and it's failed to take Kyiv, and it's more than a month now, 2 months, already saying we're about to take Pokrovsk, we're about to take Pokrovsk. Why haven't they taken it? Russia doesn't have the physical capacity to take Pokrovsk, which is just absolutely incredible of how weak the Russian military really is. This is their great claim to fame, is that they are taking a town that before the war had a population of about 60,000 people. Today it's uninhabited almost. That's what they can claim. We've almost taken a village in the Donbass. That's not really a great achievement. So Putin is trying to show strength to the Americans and to the domestic population by showing up to meetings in his military uniform. But it does not actually make him any stronger. It just makes him a dictator wearing a uniform.
But actually, according to your words, it looks like that Putin doesn't have any trump cards. But I think it is not true. In your opinion, what is the most influential trump card Putin has right now?
Vladimir Putin doesn't really have any strong trump cards. Now, in terms of the Americans, I think that he's trying to plant the idea with the Trump administration that he's interested in peace because he is holding out this illusion, this mirage, that that's what he wants, because he's hoping that the American leader will buy into it, and thereby the American leader hopes he'll get his Nobel Peace Prize. That's totally unrealistic, but I think that's what he's trying to dangle in front of the Americans. But at the same time, as far as the war goes, he doesn't really have any trump cards. I mean, if he had them, he would already use them. At this point, he's burning through his military at a rate that's simply phenomenal. The Russian economy cannot support this. If things continue as they currently are, by the middle of January, which is only 6 weeks away, the Russian economy could very well go into total freefall. There could be hyperinflation of the ruble. And if that were to occur, that would trouble his entire regime. The entire Putin regime very well could fall. That's realistic. And so Vladimir Putin is any other dictator. His top priority is not the Russian state or Russia's interest or winning the war in Ukraine. His top priority is making sure that he does not fall from power. making sure that he remains an autocrat and doesn't end up like Gaddafi. That is his objective. So looking at what happens next, I think that Vladimir Putin has very little that he can offer as far as strength goes, but he has a lot of concerns that he has to maintain about being able to maintain power. So today he's actually negotiating from a position of weakness.
And actually, I would like to ask you about, in general, situation in Kremlin. What about Russian establishment? Political, military establishment.
So within the Kremlin itself, there's a lot that's going on in recent times that's changed. Now, Vladimir Putin, historically, in his 25 years as dictator of Russia, has not typically hired people that were his own family. But today we know there's about 26 family members who are actually directly related to him, who are serving in senior positions. That includes the deputy Minister of Defense, as well as the Minister of Energy. What's interesting about that is those are the ones that have the most amount of money around them. And so sure enough, he's appointed his own people. But what that also means is that the clans that historically had those positions have been pushed to the side. But within the clans that run the Kremlin today, if we look at the ones that come from the security sector, for instance, the Bortnikov and these guys, they're getting stronger. Those like Zolotov, who's in charge of the National Guard, is getting stronger. But those in the military, formerly the Shoigu faction, Gerasimov, who looks like he's going to be fired soon, they're being pushed to the side as well. But all this is shaping up to be a consolidation of power from the different clans, which is ultimately, I think, a lot of what this war is actually about. It's about what was happening within the clans in Moscow and what they thought was necessary to maintain power and to generate more wealth. Because ultimately, I think a large reason for this current war is actually because it's economically beneficial to specific people in the Kremlin.
Okay, when it comes to peace plan, do you believe that this peace plan can be effective in general?
No, I don't think it can be effective. The reality is that if it doesn't have security guarantees, which is the current formula, then we've seen that Russia historically, when there's not these guarantees, it just doesn't take it seriously. It's going to just invade again. So this will really just give Russia time to rearm and then reinvade Ukraine. And that would be much more to the disadvantage of Ukraine. Because consider this, after the war, Ukraine's going to have a lot of rebuilding to do. It's going to have significant economic problems, and it won't be able to maintain a large military like it has today. But Russia will have the ability to continue building up its military. And that's something that would then give it an advantage when it tries to reinvade. So I don't expect anything positive to come of these talks or these negotiations.
But actually, Putin has been talking a lot about voluntary withdrawal of Ukrainian army from Donbas. Otherwise, he intimidates to conquer all Donbas with force. In your opinion, how will events develop on the front line in this case, especially in Donbas?
Well, I think first we have to understand that Vladimir Putin saying that they should just give him the territory is absolutely absurd. Russia has burnt through more than 1,100,000 soldiers in the course of almost 4 years, and they have not been able to take off the Donbass. Just imagine how incredible that really is. So why would we possibly right now give him the territory that he cannot himself take? His only hope of getting that territory is if the United States essentially forces Ukraine to agree to this. So that means that it's not Russia that is able to physically take the territory, but it's Russia using the United States as a proxy to make sure that it achieves what Russia has failed to achieve itself militarily. Russia today does not have the capacity to take the rest of Donbass. If you consider the fact that to take the rest of the territory, Russia is currently losing about 170 or 180 soldiers per square kilometer. To take the rest of Donbass, they would face about 1.25 million more casualties. Russia doesn't have the capacity militarily, economically, or politically to continue doing that. That's why I think it's wholly unrealistic that they'll be able to succeed there.
Which security guarantees can be effective?
For Ukraine, there's a lot that it needs. I mean, long term, of course, we want to see NATO membership. But in the short term, I think guarantees from the major countries of NATO would achieve the goal that we have. If, for instance, if there were British troops here, or American troops, or French troops, these would all things that would be positive for Ukraine. Because at that point, Moscow would risk a lot more to try to reinvade in the future. Because if anything were to happen to those troops, that could spark into a much larger crisis for Moscow than what it wants. So I think that this is what Ukraine needs to seek from day one, and should absolutely not sign any agreement without security guarantees.
Actually, I'm pretty sure that any effective security guarantees for Ukraine will not be acceptable for Kremlin.
I'm pretty sure about that as well. Because this is what I was saying, is that this is not serious. The Kremlin is not taking this seriously. Look at the leaked phone calls that we have between Ushakov and Dimitrov. In that call, they said, which talking points or which points for the negotiation should we send to the Americans? Let's send them the really strong ones. What's interesting about that is they didn't say, what did we discuss in Alaska during those talks? What did we discuss in the earlier talks? They didn't discuss any of this. All that we've gone through for months and months and months meant nothing to them. They didn't review any of this information. They just went back and copy-pasted a document from 2022 and sent it. So in fact, all these many months now, almost a full year of these forced negotiations, what has it achieved? Absolutely nothing. It's been a waste of time. The Soviets operated in a very similar way as far as it goes with their Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It was always about how to waste time and how to buy time, but always to give the illusion that we're really close to making great things happen. We're very close to making a deal. You can help us cross the line. But the fact is they have no desire whatsoever to make a deal. But they are hoping to see that the United States will force Ukraine into a weaker position, which would then give them an advantage.
Yeah, at least 4 Russian tankers have been attacked in international waters recently. How you assess this strategy and to what consequences can it lead?
It's a good strategy, and it's absolutely what Ukraine should be doing. The fact is we have to make it impossible for Russia to continue waging war. 40% of the Russian national budget comes from oil sales, historically. But there's something else very important about this. The cost for insurance for these ships has gone up time and again. And right now, if you know that they're routinely being attacked, we can assume it's going to become cost prohibitive at some point. Because you realize, once it gets to the Black Sea, there's a very good chance that Ukraine will destroy it. Now, if that's the case, and you realize that you're going to risk your ship, would you really want to rent it out to the Russians? Because there's a huge chance you'll never see your ship again, and you'll lose a lot of money. For the Kremlin going ahead, it's going to be harder and harder to maintain this war in Ukraine because it simply doesn't have the economic ability to continue waging war. And that's why I think overall what Ukraine is doing is absolutely the right step. It's the only way possible to make sure that we cripple the Kremlin.
And actually, we had to add to this situation long-range attacks,
Yes.
missile attacks in Russia.
Absolutely. And the long-range attacks inside of Russia have been fantastic. And not just the refineries. Look at the fact that Ukraine has been attacking things like factories that produce chemicals that are single source. That is, no other factory in Russia produces them. So if you attack a factory like that, let's imagine it's a chemical compound that's used in something like oil refining. There's no other factory that produces it. That means that Russia at that point really has a lot of problems. It creates more deficits of other things or other products that are produced using that compound. There's a very complex strategy that Ukraine is executing that's been successful. But more than that, I think that it's about putting not just economic pressure, but also political pressure. The more that Putin feels that he himself might lose, that is, his regime is going to be put at risk, the higher the probability that he will then wish to end the war in Ukraine.
What should we wait in Venezuela? Will Trump start military operation there?
It seems at this point that it's unlikely that it'll happen right now because he's trying to get a deal with Maduro to just leave. Now, if Maduro just leaves, it would probably be the best case for everybody involved. But going ahead, we have to understand Maduro and his role and why this is so important. Maduro himself is, of course, a dictator. But the reason that he has multiple arrest warrants in the United States, preceding, by the way, the Trump administration, is because he's involved in international trade of narcotics. That's a fact. He works also with organizations like Hezbollah and Iran in the smuggling of gold. That gold is then sold in countries like Lebanon. That money is then converted and turns into international terrorism. But they work with the Russians in this as well. That's why Russia has expressed such a strong interest. And this is why it also comes at such a convenient moment to put more pressure on Moscow. Moscow, we saw when Syria fell and the Assad regime was going down, they could do nothing to help them. So Syria was by far much more important for Russia, given its location and its naval base there, than is Venezuela. But there's no way that Venezuela can hope that the Russians will come save them.
Macron is going to China. As we know, many analysts say that real keys for stop of the war in Xi Jinping's pocket. How decisions of Xi can influence Russia and the war in general?
Xi is, of course, a very interesting figure in all of this because Macron has definitely had the hope that Xi would step in. He's been saying that since about 2023. Now, I myself also thought that the peace talks, when they eventually came, would probably come from China because it's the only country that would be respected enough by Russia and also by Ukraine to actually manage this. And that's why I think ultimately American talks will fail. It's just because the Russians won't allow the Americans to have the satisfaction of having ended the war. But if it's the Chinese, there's no other choice that Russia has. Russia's trade with China is very large. It's the largest singular trade partner for Russia. Though for China, Russia is a much smaller trade partner. It's only about 4% of all trade with China is with Russia. But that's why they have a lever where they can use that as a means of trying to influence the Kremlin to make decisions that would be beneficial towards ending the war. But Xi as a whole, at this point, has been sort of waiting it out. He's not interested in getting directly involved. And I think it's because he benefits, or China benefits in the long term, by seeing a Russia that is, one, degraded militarily, but secondly, left in a position where it is the weaker partner to China. And the weaker that Russia becomes through this war, the more that China views it as being their economic and political advantage.
Jason, thank you very much. My pleasure.
Thank you.